All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names, Rastafari, all our relations, blessed love and peace. We just have a rainstorm. How we do this? Like that, like this, like this, like that. Oh, are we? Ooh, something like that. Anyway, it clears up a wee bit, but oh, it rained with that lightning and thunder. That's what it is for the moment. So right now we soaking and we got a wee bit of cool breeze. On this Juma, Erev Shabbat, and Rosh Chodesh, midsummer a week after, the approach of the Earth Strong of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. It should be a solid puja coming up in the next Upasata full moon in about less than 2 weeks. So that is our galactic, our universal ordinances at the moment, our position in this realm of Samsara at this moment, and the conditions and rituals and experiences and activities of this forest garden of Inamaka, located immediately here in Gichimakanak, Turtle Island, the Big Lakes. Ohio, Cuyahoga. Anyway, so we're sharing a wee bit today. It's been a minute. We're doing a Duolingo. How about that? Because we're doing a live joint, Wadi, without notification, without no notification. And then we're also doing this recording for archival purposes and further sharing. The joint is dusty, dirty. What? We don't have to show it. Look, it looks like fallen teeth. We got the Tibetan-like flags from what we call it, our earth flags. We had it up here, but them fall down. But you know what they say? We fall down, but we get up. Sometimes quicker, and sometimes later. What them say? Sometimes we get up fast, sometimes we get up slow. Except originally, sometimes I rhyme fast, sometimes I rhyme slow. Rhyme slow, rhyme slow. And that would be nice and smooth. Ha ha! Anyways, a wee bit of indigeneity, the majesties of Ethiopia. That's a little bit of Robert Nesta right there in the corner. And then we have the colors of Ethiopia. If you see it, you look at it. Oh, wait, I'm looking at it. I got all these cameras, all self-managed at the moment. But that's what I was talking about. Oh, we were the bamboo as well. Hardy. Greeny green is the scene. Not I mean. This is the conditions. This is the circumstances. This is the energy. And it's been a minute, so it is what it is. What are we saying for today, though? Right. This is the one. This is what, we had things on our mind for a while. They sit, they simmer, and simmer some more. Beyond the sipping, on the scissor. What am I talking about? Whatever. Things sit on the mind. They sit, they stay. Whatever. And then it builds up. Maybe. No, not yet. And then it gets to a point like, oh, well, let's just do this. It might be an event. It might just be just an accumulation. It might just be an opening of opportunity. Phone and notifications and that too. Okay. Anyway, so what immediately precipitates this pontification, this reasoning? Oh, the sparrows see me here. They say, "Where's the rice at, brother? Brother, where's the rice at?" Indeed. All right, that was on the to-do list. You're right. I didn't do it right now, so it's gonna have to wait a wee bit to wait. They're like, "Yo, come on, man." Continuing on here. What is this about? Here it is, plain and simple. We had the introductions of niceties and everything else, but here's the serious. Yo, public announcement, a public service announcement. They say, I don't know who needs to hear this now, but public service announcement. A public service announcement. Everybody, 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 everybody on this continent, everybody on this continent is out of pocket coming at anybody else on this continent and anybody else on this earth. Everybody on this continent is out of pocket coming at anybody else on this continent or anywhere else on this earth. And you already know that. You already know that. You've been know that. Why? Because this is a pirate ship. How many times we got to say this? It's a pirate ship. There's no nobility. Literally, officially, there is no nobility on this continent. It is a land of thieves and liars and murderers and rapists. The higher one is in the standings, the further atrocities that person is built on. So everybody's and everybody, that's everybody. Don't care, you're poor, you're broke, whatever. No, fine, but don't go at anybody else, because everybody feeds off of the rape, murder, theft, and lies. It's corruption. Everybody on this continent is out of pocket. That goes for anybody who is religious, whatever it is, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Buddhist, Taoist, Baha'i, Sikh, indigenous. Everybody's out of pocket coming at anybody else. Everybody's out of pocket. Facts, 100%. Ooh, that sounds strong. It sounds like I'm coming at people. So what am I talking about? The hypocrisies and ironies of life, the paradox. But it's information, it's public service information. But we're not done yet. We got balance. So here we go with the balance. Recognize that, first of all. Recognize that. And I'm going to say the balance first before we start to get into some of the details of what we're talking about in terms of how people are going at each other. And why it's important to recognize this, because how people are getting used, getting very militant and self-righteous in accusations and condemnations when they're just pawns in the game. And oblivious. Ego, temptation, intoxication, insecurity, and otherwise. But we have to answer for what we do. That's what's important. So, flip side, balancing. Everybody on this continent is out of pocket talking about anybody else. That even goes for indigenous people. Talking about anybody else. Why? Because everybody on this continent is feeding off of the corruption. Plain and simple, 100% facts. Nobody's immune. Nobody's innocent. Nobody's pure. From the newborns to the eldest. Respect due across the board. And everyone is a holy, sacred child of God. But it's appropriate to recognize if anybody's going to anybody else, they're out of pocket. Plain and simple. So that's that. Now, the flip side of it, the balance is this. Everybody around the world, everybody around the world is out of pocket coming at anybody on this continent. What? Yes, facts. Why? Everybody around the world is one of three categories. The first category is they're hand in hand. They're co-conspirators, co-guilty parties in the corruption of this country, of this continent. Not just the country. It's not just the United States. It's the continent. And if you don't think that Mexico and Canada and everybody else is as corrupt as the United States is, that's racist. What? Why is America so high and mighty in its corruption and injustice? Is Mexico any less colonial and imperial and whatever else? We can actually reason about that because the recognition of indigeneity and otherwise. But still, corruption until the land is officially returned into indigenous sovereignty. That's just a very base level of having some type of sense of propriety on this earth, in this life, on these roads of creation. So until that's done, Mexico is imperial. Guatemala, Panama, that ain't native. That's not Mayan, Aztec. and otherwise. Um, so, that being said, everybody around the world is out of pocket coming at anybody on this continent because either one, everybody around the world is got their hand in the corruption, and so they have the guilt. They share in the guilt, so they have no thing saying anybody about. They have no business saying anything about anybody on this continent because they reap in benefits. New immigrants, and additionally, all up in it. So, people who have never been to this continent, whatever, but have shares and stocks and dividends and contracts and sales and subscribers and we getting a little touchy now. Wait a minute, we stepping on the young generation footsteps, foot toes and such. If the shoe fit, let them wear it. Robert Nesta. So that's across the board. Everybody around the world who's speaking with this English accent and language and inflections and everything else, doing the lingo and cultural and slang and everything else, swagger, trying to be da 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 da. No, out of pocket talking about anybody on this continent. That's the first category. Second category is the ones that don't do that. The ones that keep away, keep a distance from whatever is going on here, this, that, the other. The authoritarians, and additionally, still out of pocket. Why? Because the kinfolk of this continent, particularly those that arrive here in the past 7 generations, are those primarily who have been abused and experienced the atrocities of the kinfolk from around the world. The rape, pillage, murder, theft, injustice of the kinfolk around the world, and fleeing from that, coming here and getting some respite, but then doing it to those who are less corrupt and predatory, or at least equipped with weaponized technology. So, point is, the world is guilty. The world has been abusive to its own children, to her own children. So to speak with condemnation, the world already knows this. That's why the world don't talk too tough about the United States. Not necessarily, like I said, it's either in the pocket of the United States or is guilty of abusing the United States, the kinfolk of the United States. That's the second category. Third category is the indigenous kinfolk around the world who never heard of the United States, don't care about the United States or whatever else. Out of pocket saying anything about the United States, if ever having the occasion of doing so, just because it's none of indigenous kinfolk's business. Because indigenous kinfolk focus on the homestead. So basically, indigenous kinfolk around the world have less to say and less inclined to say anything. But if there is anything said, it's out of pocket, and indigenous kinfolk have an awareness of that accordingly. So that's basically the different categories of kinfolk around the world as it pertains to the relationship in the United States. To kinfolk in the United States, or not use US states, but like I said, this continent. So that being said, we'll give some tangibility and some specificity in terms of what we're talking about in terms of out-of-pocketedness. We're telling your followers that you've started a live video. Did I say that you could? Hang on, we're telling more followers to join your video. What up? Social media and the internet. Wadi. That's the authoritarian of the predominant authoritarian phenomenon in world imperialism today. That might be something for later on. That's not necessarily the immediate thing right now, but I'm reading the prompts here and reminded of just like, yeah, governments aren't even in charge. We say that for a long time, but all right. Continuing on with the immediate course of reasoning. We're talking about specificity. Israel, Palestine, Iran, and additionally East and West, China versus Europe, China versus the United States, Asia, East Asia versus Western civilization. In each of these scenarios, well, I'm going to address and this might be personal bias or whatever else. It might be I'm feeling some kind of way about because of just there being too few to even be literate, and that's not a dig. I don't mean that condescending, but just people don't have many people are without the literacy to be able to recognize this, and those that do have the literacy are enveloped in it and have a motivation of not addressing what we're about to talk about or what we're about to share here. But it go like this, and it go a little something like this. Hit it, or like to hear it go. Those are long time references. Some of them are multiple, known in multiple contexts. The second one, the latter one, comes from Living Color, in Living Color specifically, because Living Color, I think that was the specific name of the alternative rock group around the same era. Here we go. That's what it is when we got to explain our references. Specificity, we're talking about, okay, Israel, Palestine. All right, first of all, for those who are true believers, whether one is Islam, whether one is Bnei Israel, the true believers know and recognize and proclaim there's only one God. God controls everything. Everything happens according to the will of God. Allah, Hashem, Tao. That's it. All the land, Mecca, Medina, Yerushalayim, Eretz Israel, Inamaka, Turtle Island, all of the land belongs to Creator. It does not belong to any man. It does not belong to any people. The true believers of Islam, the true believers and practitioners of the mitzvot, know this very well. No land belongs to any man. Now, some make some proclamations, some make some presumptions, some make some power moves, and make these different recitations and everything else, citations of authority and whatever, prophecy and commandments. But then resort, particularly, eventually, to false methodologies of enforcing those proclamations. And that's where the fallacy is. Because the stewardship, which is what it is and what is always meant as, the stewardship that is proclaimed and maintained at this moment is done so through violence and warfare. So it's not all those proclamations of belief and everything. I'm getting a little bit off the topic, but all those proclamations of belief from either any side, and I'm just saying this as one example. We can talk about all the different land claims around the world, about amidst all the different groups, but this one is just the specific one we're talking about now. To recognize it belongs to God, it belongs to Allah, it belongs to Hashem. For anybody to be on this earth and to have some type of stewardship, everybody belongs. Everybody belongs. Everybody is a child of God. Let's say it again. Everybody's a child of God. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Israel, Taoist, Hindu, Sikh, Baha'i, indigenous. Everyone is a child of God. Everyone is holy. Everyone has the nefesh. Everyone, yes, everyone has the divine spirit of God within oneself. So those are the first three things. One God, same God. Everything belongs to God. Some balloons just flew up. This is bungy. Everything belongs to God. Nothing belongs to man on this earth, in this life. Everyone is a child of God. Yo, I don't know why these balloons are popping up like this. And that's one of the signs of the times as well. When kinfolk think they're supportive or whatever else, it's actually not. All right. Those are three things. So when we factor those three things, before we get into any history, any who did what to who, and there is that. And my point here is not even to get into the details of that thing, because we've already shared solutions. We already shared answers before. So and everybody else knows the answer. Ultimately, It's a matter on both sides. It's recognized as whoever is righteous is the one who receives the true inheritance, and the righteous don't necessarily mean the most heavily militaristically equipped. The righteous, very often, and indeed at this moment, involves a pocket of people amidst a larger group that are doing bad things. And the pocket involved because you got to be connected with somebody. And so it's a very tenacious thing. But the point, what I'm sharing now is this: how people are being used in this particular scenario, because this is just one component of the greater macro geopolitical civilizational evolution experience. Because as I mentioned before, modern democracy is gone. It officially went on the 11th of September, and at this point, it's just been a corpse that has been usurped by by science and technology primarily, as a way of facilitating and maintaining some type of semblance of social order. But government is dead. Nobody believes in democracy, genuinely, because those who profess to do so are the biggest liars. Don't believe in too much of at all, of at all. Otherwise, people don't are just opt out. People don't vote. People don't believe politicians. People don't know their own mayors or governors or council members. And again, those who do are just lying. They're enveloped in lies and deceit. Sorry, we have to harp on this. Um, so modern democracy is gone. It's dead. Modern medicine is dead. The official time of death at that point is COVID, when people see the lies of medicine and doctors, how much people have become reliant upon doctors, and the shadiness and selfishness and greed and everything else of doctors, just like the politicians. So now people are trying to figure out, how do we like live without doctors at this point? Much like people are figuring out how do we live without government at this point. Um, or at least relying upon government and depending upon the social order, the utilities, the police, and otherwise. So, uh, getting a little bit off topic here, there's a lot in it, but so the point is, in this geopolitical shift, modern democracy gone, modern medicine gone, modern religion never was. How about that? Listen, modern religion never was. Religion continues to this day for thousands and thousands of years. The tradition of Israel, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, um, indigeneity, Sikhi is a few centuries. We can talk about Baha'i and additionally, but modern religion never was. Why? Because the modern era is the era of science and technology. Science and technology is the authoritarianism. And in order to maintain some kind of functionality within civilization, religion has enslaved itself to science and technology, weapons, riches, um, the innovations of science in order to be able to compete against each other, and have some type of influence within conventional society. Religion has sacrificed itself. Modern religion, or the semblance, or the pretense or illusion of modern religion, has sacrificed itself, has what is it, corrupted itself, has relinquished itself, or whatever else. So it never was a thing. All the vast many of memberships, and all the different congregations that are built and have all these things, those are corporate entities that are utilizing religion as a this, that, and the other. The true religionists are living in a very modest way. Religion continues. Religion exists, but it's not modern religion. It's the old time religion that just continues and has relationship with the modern religionists and otherwise. But modern religion is just a secular, assimilated experience with a certain amount of religious literacy, and some relationship to maintain some type of authenticity um, and sustainability. So, anyways, with those three things being um, being evaporated, um, that leaves just modernity, postmodernity, science and technology. And so that's the authoritarian construct within global imperialism at this moment, in this era. Religion is a continual relevance and authority, but the pervasive authority is science and technology, and it's not a monarchy, it's not an oligarchy per se. There are a lot of different factions that have a lot of different types of influences. There's still very much ethnic biases and subjectivity within that experience. Many of the cartels or syndicates or whatever are still very entrenched within it. And that's not a negative thing. I mean, homogeneity is not a negative thing. It's not a matter of everybody being pluralistic or everybody being amalgamated or whatever else. But the challenge in the modern mindset and the postmodern mindset is the biases and prejudices, discrimination and injustice that has been historically imposed along these sectarian and xenophobic lines. But the indigeneity continues to be legitimate and authentic. Legitimate. I'll include authentic within this as well when it is indigenous. And science is still essentially predicated. It's difficult to say there being like a very genuinely pluralistic, authoritarian entity within science and technology. It's difficult to discern that. But it's evolving, and the point here is that there are a lot of capabilities that science and technology have. There are a lot of capabilities that science and technology have, but there are also a lot of hindrances. So when we recognize that the practical services that are previously provided from government and from doctors and medicine, with those being on the denouement, on the downslide, on the waning side, and science and technology uber waxing, then what does that look like? Because for all the atrocities and apartheids of historic modern democracy and modern medicine too, Leopold and the experiments and atrocities in Congo and Africa, and along all the things that has been done in the name of science to people and to life. Those are atrocities just as horrendous as the droppings of bombs. Oh, wait a minute, that's science too. But that's not medicine. Oh, is it not? Chemistry and physics and the same cohorts. So the point is that with this ascension of science and technology as authoritarianism within the world imperialism, again, there are pluses and minuses with this. There are benefits and there are challenges. One of the major challenges, what I was saying before, is that for all the bad things, all the atrocities that governments commit in the past 200 years, in the past 7 generations, governments still have a certain knowledge about what people call statecraft, how to govern people. As in whether it's the Machiavellian, draconian type things or otherwise, there's still a knowledge. And it's not just a matter of like how to work people or how to like beat people to submission and orderliness or whatever else. It's understanding the nature of the collective organism, body of people, as a kingdom, as a collective, as a nation. Kings and those who rise to power, and additionally, have a knowledge about what it takes to govern people. For better or for worse, whatever the track record is or the individual's recording, there's still a knowledge about how it works. What the consequences are for bad decisions, the weight of the crown in deliberating and making a prudent decision, and knowing that it's not just some experiment where if it goes wrong, you just throw it all into the gutter and it just disappears. That's not how statecraft is. They're cosmic, divine, heavenly consequences that are imposed upon leadership beyond anybody's control or volition. It might manifest itself in a rebellion or a revolution. It might manifest itself in a disease. It might manifest itself in a natural disaster. It might manifest itself in the the rising up of heathens around oneself, around one's uh, uh, um, homeland. It might manifest itself in the marauding strangers from distant lands. But there's a recognition that when the leaders make imprudent decisions that cause harm to others, um, and had proper information and ability to make proper decisions, consequences. Science and technology has yet to proficiently learn this, um, and that's a significant liability. That's one of the detriments. Um, um, that's one of the skill sets that science and technology is without significantly. That's an absence of an absolute, but science and technology is very ill-equipped to govern, which is why science and technology is still working through the puppetry of government, because that's what people have a familiarity with, and so it's a matter of hiring people who still have some semblance of knowledge about how that works. But it's been over a generation now, in terms of since the demise of democratic governments, and even the leadership like is out of pocket and saying stuff, to be honest, about anything. And it's just a matter of like who is motivated by their own economic gains to just tote the line in whatever is being presented to people. And then how much can those people keep anyone else around them at bay or subdued or otherwise? It's a very crude and ad hoc type of methodology of governance, but that's what we observe at this moment. So the point is, again, science and technology is not, and it doesn't seem to even try to train its, or even know how to train its leadership, because the nature of science and technology is very mathematic, it's very formulaic, it's very book learning, it's not experiential. In the past generations, if it's a king, the king learns from the crib what it is to govern people, the weight of the crown. Again, there are different types of kings or whatever else, but a king learns, has a court, has advisors, sees their own parents, sees his own parents. Queen sees her own parents, what they do, how they govern. They see, they learn, they meet the dignitaries and the leaders and the nobility of other peoples, other kings and of other lands. So it's a process, and it's not just what one learns in one's own lifetime, but it's the intergenerational knowledge, and it's like it's every day. It's not just a vacation. It's not just a job. It's not just like a part-time. It's every day. The dreams are this. The waking state is this. Everything is about governing people. And it's a heavy weight. That's why very few want to do that. People say they do, but they actually don't. Because if they did, they would. Yes, I. So that's kings. Same thing if it's a general who rises through the ranks. The general, it's experience. It's learning about the nature of men, the nature of women, the psychology, getting some kind of trust amongst people, having some efficacy and being a leadership, inspiring, and additionally. So even if it's somebody who rises through the ranks in one generation and becomes a leader of a nation, they do so through tenacious experience, so that by the time they get to that position of recognized authority, they have an idea of what to do, at least for the rest of their life, and then do the best to teach the next generation, whether it's their son, their daughter, the community, or whatever else. Science and technology doesn't even try at this moment to have that skill set. Even psychology doesn't do it. Psychiatry definitely doesn't do it. And thus there's a significant void of that statecraft that human life needs, because science and technology focuses again on numbers, formulas, engineering, possibilities, theses, experimentation, and cultivates a realm of a learning environment and a working environment that is very buffered and away from what's going on amongst the masses, so that there's this air of quietude, and at the same time, a comfort and a sense of privilege, exclusivity, so that people are very motivated to stay and actually fearful of being kicked out. So thus being very motivated to be obedient and abide by whatever is put in front of people, and to perform, motivated to perform, do the work, complete the examinations and everything else like that. But at the same time also to be buffered from the consequences of incalculate or of inaccuracies, indulgences, intoxications, and otherwise, indiscretions. And it might be effective for a short term. It catches up. So science and technology is very limited in terms of being able to genuinely lead people. And thus, what we find ourselves in at the moment is a vacuum of guidance. There's a lot of capabilities. Technology provides a lot of things, and there's a lot of motivations. And there's there's compensation for these capabilities. A new thing can do something quicker, and whether it's AI, whether it's robotics or otherwise. So there's a tangibility, there's a practicality to the innovation, and so that provides motivation. The compensation provides motivation in hierarchy and valuation amongst peers, and additionally to provide some type of social order in terms of interaction, but not in terms of guidance and ethics and behavior. And then the big thing is that part of this technology and part of this innovation is weaponry, so that whenever there's any disagreement or whatever, weapons. And the weapons can be the conventional artillery, bombs, but also sabotage, espionage, intelligence accumulation and manipulation there. That involves further psychology and further statecraft type skills, but the capabilities are there, and that is another way of further entrenching the authoritarianism of science and technology, and particularly as leverage in negotiating with other entities outside of science and technology, generally, including those who are raised and learned in statecraft, medicine, and other fields of endeavor. All right, well, that's a lot. How long we've been at this right now? Wait a while, half an hour. All right, 37. So we're still not finished talking about Israel-Palestine. So I mentioned, wow, that was all just about as a pretext for, that was actually a sidetrack of the pretext of where things are in terms of global civilization, modern democracy, this and the other. So just to give some, like a very extremely brief synopsis with a certain amount of imbalance focused on the Western, quote unquote, Western side as it pertains or as it involves Israel and Palestine. Just to explain like why people are being used, how people are pawns in this thing. So first of all, as I mentioned, everything belongs to God. Well, there's one God, everything belongs to God, everyone is a child of God. Anyone's stewardship of land is essentially involves two conditions. Either in there are additional qualities, but these are the primary ones. One, whether a person or peoples are indigenous to that land. That's a universal principle when determining a person's legitimacy of stewardship. The other is if the person is being righteous, or if those peoples are being righteous. So that particularly is the law and the rule and the code within Islam as well as within Israel. And both sides are woeful in violating those precepts. Both sides are woeful in violating both of those precepts, indigeneity as well as righteousness. 100% facts. Due respect and love to all kinfolk. Islam, Israel, Ishmael, Yitzhak, due respect and love. But both fall short of that criteria to proclaim um, authentic, legitimate stewardship of the land of Eretz Israel, Philistia, Palestine, even Mecca and Medina. And that's whoever talking about that, it's all on the table. That's what we're talking about. But rather than get into that, it's a matter of recognizing that both sides don't qualify. And ain't nobody else on this earth that qualifies, to be honest, essentially. We can talk about the is it the Bedouin or otherwise, but that's another topic. Getting to something particular and practical here. So, all right. The other thing also when it comes to this particular issue, as a world thing, when I'm seeing flags of Rastafari kinfolk in Japan talking about free Palestine, understand please that this is also a brotherly family feud. Anybody else who ain't in the family is out of pocket, but they jumping on the bandwagon because, well, just it's a family feud. Now, members of the family might try to go to others outside the family and say, yo, you need to help us. Okay, but just recognize when responding, don't anybody else outside the family don't have standing inside the family. They're not, and I'm specifically articulating this to kinfolk who are not Muslim, who do not pray 5 times a day, who do not fast during Ramadan, who do not provide zakat, who do not make Hajj, who do not even proclaim Shahada. A lot of activists are atheists and otherwise. So ain't no kind of Islam going on, ain't no type of Israel. Many Jews in addition are non-practicing as well. Point is that, I'm working to get to this thing without trying to say everything about it. Many people are jumping on the bandwagon. They see an opportunity to make some type of proclamation that seems righteous. It seems like it's the politically correct thing to do, without knowing what they're doing, without knowing what they're talking about. They see just something that looks like a bully and an underdog, and then just want to be just so militant in fighting for the underdog. It's very understandable, but it's very out of pocket. And before I get to like the kicker of this, it's a matter of recognizing that, one, it's very antagonistic and antithetical against Islam, because that motivation of taking up the cause of the underdog, it's this big old imperialist Israel who is killing anyone, we against that. Israel is way atrocity for that. Recognize, we see that, it's seen, we agree. But to like presume Israel as some kind of this behemoth, Illuminati, Rothschilds, control everything kind of thing, you don't know history. The kinfolk who proclaim this either don't know history or are knowingly lying, because Islam is the world power all the way up to World War I. And even from that. So people who perceive Palestine as underdog, yes, there's atrocities. You don't have to tell us about atrocities. You don't have to tell us about atrocities at the hands of Jewish brethren. You do not have to tell us about that. Serious trust. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. You don't have to tell us about that. So we understand that, and we recognize that, and we see that, but recognize that. I'll put it like this. I'm going to try to say this just as plain matter of fact. The people of Israel, the children of Israel, Bnei Israel. First, I'll understand Jews, Yehuda, what the difference is between that and Israel. And even within Israel, the difference between the Levim, the Kohanim, and it's not a monolith even amongst the children of Israel, and that's important to recognize. And then if you don't know that, then you better be careful about things that you do. And actually, this is actually getting to a very specific thing that's very tangible and immediate, which precipitates this, which is why I say this, but I have to get to there first. So when we talk about imperialism, and we talk about Islam, and we talk about Israel, Israel is actually not very imperialistic. Generally speaking, Israel is very we can say selfish, self-focused, self-serving. That's probably the best word to say. Self-serving. Like intensely. Well, I don't, pun unintended, but there it is. Israel is extremely, hugely self-serving and unapologetic about it. The children of Israel, from Torah through the thousands of years, do not go out and proselytize. Aren't trying to get converts, aren't trying to get numbers to join in additionally. It's all for self. That's it. Small numbers. But at the same time, in being so intense, in being self-serving, have some staying power through the ages, through the generations, through the regime changes, so that when the regimes do change and the regimes need that statecraft advisory, who knows what to do about that? Children of Israel. The 1, 2, 3 representatives there and otherwise. And in doing that, oh sure, we'll give you advice. This is what we want in return. Money, 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 money. Land, gold, silver, and otherwise. And so that's how it's accumulated, that's how it maintains, and it stays in the family. It stays in the community. And it's very self-serving. But the fact is, ain't no other religion or community can fault Jews or Israel for being very self-serving. Now, the other part of that is that also the Bnei Israel is not hostile, generally not hostile to any other community. Isn't trying to conquer any other community, isn't trying to convert any other community, doesn't go out and tell anybody in the community they're inferior, whatever else. Strong, extreme belief that everybody else is inferior, yes. But isn't going out there and trying to conquer everyone. Very shrewd in manipulating all the powers that be for the self-serving purposes, yes. Connected with the echelons of world imperialism, yes. But in and of itself, doesn't have that motivation. Doesn't have that interest, per se. We can talk about what happens after a kingdom gets established and then becomes eventually corrupt, and the history of that within Eretz Israel from thousands of years ago and further. But generally speaking, by and large, and particularly amidst the age, the era, the epoch of the diaspora, not imperialistic, just very opportunistic and extremely self-serving. And yes, a very dehumanizing perspective and belief towards anyone outside of the family, anybody outside of the fold, anybody outside of the tribe, yes. And amidst that very dehumanizing perspective, very callous and indifferent about causing harm when perceived as necessary or prudent. And that is nasty. And you don't have to tell us about that. We know. And the thing about it is, you will not find particularly in the context of the Quran and the Torah. I've said this before. You can look through the entirety, study and read the entirety of the Quran, and there's nothing that comes anywhere close to the own curses against the children of Israel that are articulated within the Torah. As nasty as Jewish kinfolk in Israel is towards outsiders, outside the tribe, it's nasty to itself. It is self-hating and self-afflicting, and it's taught to be that, particularly when it's not obedient to its own ways. And ain't no stranger can do the atrocities and commit the hatred against Israel greater than what Israel does to Israel's own self. And Sri Krishna says it himself on the battlefield to Arjuna, the same thing. Each person is each one's own worst enemy. So, that being said, yes, Israel is extremely self-serving and opportunistic and involved in the manipulations of imperialism, but itself is not imperialistic, isn't trying to conquer things, isn't trying to conquer peoples or whatever else. Now, when we look at Islam, what we see, what we recognize, what we observe is that there is a very pervasive culture of converting people, going out and conquering. Islam is much further imperialistic towards the world than Israel is, because part of the advent, part of the guidance and calling and going forth within Islam, not necessarily very emphasized within the Quran, but through not even my knowledge is very modest, so I have to be careful of how much I conclude or profess in that respect. However, the Sunnah itself also does not necessarily emphasize an experience and a vocation of conquering and conquest and conversion, and it's actually a matter of righting injustice and imbalance, and when there is an imbalance, to do so accordingly. But particularly during the time of the establishment of the Ummah, there is just this pervasive conquest, and it does become extremely imperialistic to be the super world power for a long time, like I said, even up to the First World War. So Islam, as perceived as an underdog, is a misnomer. And within the Western mindset, it's just, again, it's actually a symptom and an evidence of the extreme and entrenched racism and xenophobia within the Western mind. Oh, look at poor Muslims, the poor brown people, being impoverished. And additionally, and I'm not speaking exclusively about Palestine, I'm just talking about people's mindsets and how within Islam, do you not understand how intelligent Muslims are? For over 1,000 years, masterminds doing things that are beyond Machiavelli. And additionally, you don't think that Muslims can be mastermind strategies in politics and economics? That's the condescending. That's the hypocrisy. That's the ignorance and the racism that Islam is building it. That Islamic activism is building itself on within the racism of Western minds and the guilt that Western minds experience. So the mass genius brethren, the Akim within Islam, know the Western mind huge, and know how much the Western mind depends upon Islam, the mathematics, the schools, and additionally. And so the masterminds within the Ummah know this and are continually evolving the methodologies of how to manipulate Western minds in a very imperialistic way. And what the masterminds within the Ummah recognize is that, oh, these Westerners feel very guilty about being imperialistic, particularly these immigrant Westerners who come from all these different lands and aren't white and can't just immerse themselves within the delusions of white supremacy because they're not accepted, but still want to like hold on to the benefits of Westernization, but then have to do something with that guilt of that as well. So okay, well, here's this cause. Well, the blacks are on their way out, so that's not going to be something too tough. And indigenousness, we don't want to talk about indigenous because we ourselves are imperialistic and we don't honor indigeneity either. So, what we can do is we can offer the Ummah as the Ethiopia of the postmodern era. Ethiopia being back in the 80s, particularly being like the cliche of the impoverished African, being like the epitome of charity. So anybody who's doing something UNICEF, I remember walking around for Halloween with UNICEF boxes asking for donations. Would never do that for anything else. How do those boxes get put into our hands? Through our schools and additionally. But it's for Africa. It's for starving children. And we would see the images of dark-skinned babies with bloated stomachs who are starving in the deserts of Africa. So that was the face of charity, world charity, and poverty. So okay, help it out. And it becomes something that's unquestioned. It becomes something that becomes like a foundation of confidence that, first of all, we're not that. So thank God we're not that. When the parents say, "Oh, you don't like that? Well, there are children starving in Ethiopia, da 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 da. So you should be happy you have that." It becomes that foundation of assertion of hierarchy, where we say, okay, at least we're not that. But at the same time, we have to feel empathy, and we have to feel some type of like want of to provide and support. And so, but at this point, you can't do that too much because one, Ethiopia ain't impoverished. How about that? Ethiopia is rich actually, and the world is further knowledgeable. Black folk, it's difficult to for black folk in the United States, particularly to be that foundation of bottom, because for a number of reasons, to actually address that would mean would be deconstructing the United States itself, and repatriation and 40 acres and a mule and other types of stuff. And ain't no way that happen anytime soon, volitionally by the United States or otherwise. So blacks as the blacks as the epitome of poverty is less feasible. Actually, I'm not gonna phrase it in that sense, but put in the world imperialism scheme, what we observe is how Islamic activism is offering Palestine as the epitome of world poverty, affliction, oppression, persecution, and this trope of underdog and bully. And in doing that, it's distracting people away from the atrocities that are going against black folk for hundreds of years to this day. The actual genocide of black folk on this continent. It's taking people's minds off that, and no. Well, look at them. Look at this. They just drunk and doing hip hop and shaking their booty. And you want to save those people? So the attention is for Palestine. People can jump on the bandwagon for Palestine, whether they're in Japan or otherwise, and that becomes the epitome in this strategy of the epitome of poverty, the foundation. So at least we're not Palestine, but then we have to feel empathy for Palestine, and there's no arguing against it, presumably, and that's part of the danger again, because that jumping on the bandwagon and that empathy, that buying into the trope of the bully and the underdog is actually based upon one's own ignorance and xenophobia and racism, and perceiving the Ummah as inferior or at least afflicted by Israel. And to give it some further context and some further perspective, where and this is what is said in Palestine itself. When you see enough video of it, where is the Ummah? Where is the Arab, the billion strong Arab community in solidarity with Palestine? Where is it? How is it that a billion Muslims, when people are doing dawah and telling people to join the Ummah beyond Christianity, and additionally, if that's the case, and if there are a billion strong Muslims who are practicing the deen, where is it for Palestine? Where is it in the Arabian Peninsula when there are skyscrapers being built and football clubs being bought, luxury yachts and missiles and everything else that are being brokered in Arabia, Saudi, Qatar, the Emirates? All this solidarity and activism for Palestine, where is the Ummah? Where is the deen? And that's the actuality, because again, there ain't as much practice within the Ummah. There ain't that much practice in the shul on either side of righteousness. And so it's hypocrisy, it's hype and propaganda, it's circling wagons, it's bandwagons, and it's all that. And that's why we caution people for being so, particularly who don't know. It's not some easy given. It's not some youthful militants of thumbing it at the older generation or whatever. It's being mindful of how much kinfolk get onto something. And I'm just reminded this is live and it's also recorded. So, and it's also going on and on and on and on. We're at an hour. Okay. Um, Now, the big thing, and again, and I'm just going to say this because we talk about black folk, black folk, black folk. I am talking about my ancestors. I am talking about my peoples. I'm talking about what, well, I'm not going to get into the challenges and everything else like that, but to recognize, as I said before, there's a genocide going on this continent because the labor of African kinfolk is less, is significantly undesired within the economy of this continent. And yet there's over 30 million strong who live here. And so there is a process that's been going on for a while of just unemployment, poverty, public subsidization, deterioration of family, isolation, institutionalization, health affliction, deprivation of nutrients, just as a way of slowly suffocating and killing, particularly people of African ancestry. And it's as plain as day. And when people come around to try to advocate or whatever, quote unquote, Black Lives Matter, they don't care. They're making money. It's a lucrative. That was a lucrative business. That whole branding thing. Branding is slavery. What does branding mean? People put brands on cattle to signify ownership of cattle. People put brands on people as slaves to signify ownership of slaves. But the society at this point is so devolved or corrupted that people say this concept of branding themselves on social media and establishing their platform and influencing and everything, it's propagating this self-perpetuating experience of enslavement. People generally perceive it as enslavement to a faceless, institutional, systematic kind of unfortunateness, and because it's faceless, it's less it's less egregious to the ego. It's easier to tolerate, but it's no less enslaving, and sometimes it's even further difficult to emancipate oneself from that enslavement. And ain't nobody else who can emancipate us except ourselves. And it's what the emancipation essentially and simply is letting go of the things that are enslaving us. Wada, plain and simple. The Buddha say it, and so many others. That's what the whole exodus is. Letting go of the things that enslave us. Easier said than done. But when it is done, life is so much further difficult. Hiya! Anyway, but it's beautiful. It's always beautiful. We'll get to that in a minute. Optimism, positivity, build upon. We're not done yet though. So in this scenario, in this strategy, this geopolitical strategy of establishing Palestine as the epitome of poverty, it is changing, or it's distracting people away from the genocide against people of African ancestry, and just like, oh no, well, blah blah blah. We had a whole half century about the civil rights. We've had enough of that. Now we want to look at somebody else now. But at this whole time, the huge thing is indigeneity, native people, because imperialism, the imperialism of Islam, the Ummah, immigration, regardless if kinfolk are coming from the Middle East, India, China, Japan, Pakistan, Africa, Europe, or Asia, or otherwise. The paradigm of imperialism epitomized by the United States is one that is extremely hostile, antagonistic, violent against indigenousness, nativeness. It's not even a matter of vilifying the people. Can't do that. What you got against native people? What? It's just a matter of pretending that native people don't exist any further. That's the genocide is so strong on this continent. 99% of the people generally speaking. Let's say 98% of the people, according to the U.S. Census. And even that might be very inaccurate. It might be only 50% of the people. How do we know? 50% of the people might be indigenous, but the narrative is that 98% of the people on this, in the United States at least, the numbers are a little bit different outside of the United States, but 98% of the people in the United States are not from the United States. That is perhaps the closest textbook example of genocide that the world is able to display at this moment. The United States is deep in it. Not only the United States, the world is deep within the genocide of indigenous people on this continent. And religions are deep within the genocide. Christians, obviously, and peace and blessings to all Christian kinfolk, but you know that's true. Jewish kinfolk, most definitely deep in the genocide of indigenous people on this continent. Muslims are catching up extremely fast and extremely effectively within this narrative of genocide of the indigenous people. And the thing is, the way the Muslim kinfolk are doing it, don't have to kill indigenous people outright as Christians do for a number of centuries. That's been done already. Now it's just a matter of changing the narrative and what is told to the children. And additionally, amidst there still being indigenous people here, it's not a history story. It's today life. So it's the nature of how genocide is manifested at this moment, at this exact moment. It's not a matter of there being killing sprees or whatever, although when we talk about what's happening to indigenous women, the epidemic of missing and murdered indigenous women, where there are reservations and places of locations where indigenous people reside and live, it's part of the symptom and consequence of the narrative of generation at this moment, whereby people just pretend, oh, well, are there any native people here? When you go to big cities or whatever else, there's very little evidence of any indigenous people or indigenous life living there. All the names and everything are off. When you get further inland, you see further references to the indigenous names, because particularly, even amongst the imperialists, giving indigenous names to cities, streets, municipalities, and districts is a way of keeping other imperialists away. Wow. And feigning some semblance of indigeneity compared to the new and arriving imperialists. So it's not genuinely honoring or cultivating a relationship with the indigenous kinfolk. It is actually just using it further to keep away from other people doing the same thing that the old imperialists did to the indigenous people. So what we observe amongst our dear sacred Muslim kinfolk is diving full fold into this trope of imperialistic genocide of indigenous people. And it's just so obvious. It's painfully and just infuriatingly obvious when the whole premise of the advocacy and support for Palestine is based upon the proclamation of Palestinians living in Palestine before the establishment of the nation of Israel. Okay, you're an indigenous activist now. You're promoting a cause based on the principle of indigeneity. You betcha, of course. That's no brainer. Whatever, of course, that speaks for itself. Why are you a U.S. citizen? What? Huh? Why do you have a house? Why do you have a title to a house? That's why it's so hypocritical. That's why it's so bullshit. And that's why it's infuriating. Because it's not just opportunistic. It's insidious. Because on the one hand, it's establishing itself as the epitome of poverty based upon the principle of indigeneity. But at the same time, it is ignoring and pushing to the side, not even pushing to the side the cause of indigenousness within this continent, on this hemisphere, but not just that, but just actively accumulating land and establishing communities and endeavoring to immerse within imperialism at the cost of the genocide of the indigenous people of this land. So on one hand, it's a matter of like saying, oh, you respect who's here first in indigenousness when it's us, but at the same time, oh, we don't care about the indigenous people here. Yeah, we can live here. So it's just so bullshit. It's not even bullshit. It's shaitan. To be honest, it is shaitan. It's lies, and it's lies that are causing death and pain and destruction. It's shaitan when the bombs are dropped on Palestinian kinfolk. That's shaitan too. We call it out, seen, and we're very careful about that because when we talk about shaitan, we're conjuring that. So we try to do our best to talk about Ar-Rahmani Ar-Rahim, Creator, Inamaka, Mother Earth, Tao, Brahman. We talk about the greatest power, the greatest purpose, the greatest love. But we have to call out things for what they are as best as we can. And we invite respectful reasoning. Now, here's the I'm gonna wrap this up. Well, how long am I going into this? Jadi. All right. It's appropriate to recognize. I've said this before. And I'm saying it again because we continue to see this on social media, and additionally, it's like we have to either let go of all of social media just so to avoid seeing the hypocrisy. And it's not just hypocrisy. It's an evilness because it's an intentionality. If people aren't intentionally doing it themselves in terms of promoting a cause, but exactly in promoting the cause, doing the exact same atrocity to others and trying to cover it up and take people's attention off of those atrocities and then plea for help and assistance for the atrocities that are being done to oneself, that is a sinisterness. And we have to be careful how much we just even like expose ourselves to that type of proclamation. So that's in social media. That's even just walking on the streets. And additionally, and we say it again, so people can be just knowledgeable. And we try to do this. I'm trying to articulate this. We endeavor to articulate this in a respectful way, in an honest, factual way, without getting too emotional. But you have to get emotional if you're going to be real about this. You got to have some empathy. You got to have some irrationality, because that's what faith is. We've got to have ration. We got to have our reasons. Got to have logic. Got to explain ourselves in this earthly language. But at the same time, we got to have love. And we got to have this sense of lightweight indignation. Not too heavy on that. But just we got to have that feel. Like, come on. Y'all know what's right. Particularly when you're claiming to know what's right. All right, now the further thing about that again, it's not just infuriating. It's like we share in the guilt when we just witness it, and then we just don't say anything in response, whatever. So here's our little platform amidst the imperialism of the internet or whatever else on these free YouTube, Insta, whatever sites or whatever. Now here's the other thing I'm talking about. And this is for those who know. This is for those who have some knowledge. This is for those who have some learnedness. This is tzitzit. It's specifically within the tradition of Israel. You can call it Judaism. Again, there's a difference between Judaism. Judaism is only a part of Israel. You can call it Hebrew Israelites, African Hebrew Israelites, and otherwise. But the basic joint of it's for some. This is a signifier. This is a signal of affiliation, allegiance, set claiming, or whatever else. And can't deny that. There's an element of that. But that's not the purpose of what this is. And this is what I'm getting to specifically. One of the things that precipitates me doing this joint at the moment. It's all this personal thing or whatever. But there's a further universal relevance to what I'm articulating. So I'll say, God willing, what that is, what the tzitzit are. And then why it's important, what relevance it has to what I'm talking about right now. So many people don't have any idea what that is, and so that's fine. Many people who are activists have little idea what it is because they don't have a lot of religious literacy. Many Muslims know very well what that is, and like respond to it accordingly. And that's not just necessarily hate, because not all Muslims have hate or are quick to hate, because as it teaches us within the Quran, we have to investigate in honesty. So, all right. So what these tzitzits are. So for those who have a literacy about religion, anybody who's wearing tzitzit is known or is presumed as not just a Jew, but generally an Orthodox, like a practitioner of the tradition of the mitzvot. That's what it's actually signifying. It's not its actual predominant purpose, but that's what that's what it signifies. So anybody who has that literacy about Judaism and otherwise is, when seeing that, say, okay, that's a hardcore cat right there, or at least that's a cat who's proclaiming to be hardcore, because we have to investigate. And so when a Muslim sees that within a person, they know, oh, we do. It's a very high likelihood of what that person's politics are, and additionally, and so that's reasons for hostility. It's understood. It's logical. It's not necessarily accurate, and that's important, because when one is a believer, when one is religious, one knows the significant consequences of inaccuracy. But even just slight inaccuracy, when one is very authoritarian and strong, a little bit of inaccuracy has heavy ripples, and believers understand this. And that's why I'm articulating this, because I am told to by the Quran, when brethren are doing something that is inaccurate, we have a responsibility to share the information as respectful as possible. So this is what we're doing. So what is the tzitzit? The tzitzit, as it is commanded within the Torah, is a reminder for the wearer, the person who wears, and it's a man. Only men are commanded to wear this. It is a reminder of the 613 mitzvot, the 613 commandments of righteousness to live on this earth. It is a continual reminder that, you think you can do what you want? You think you can say what you want to say? Remember what you're supposed to be doing. That's what this is. It's a reminder to be righteous. Plain and simple. That's what this is. It's a reminder to be righteous. We study the mitzvot. We study the Torah. The Talmud is another level beyond where I'm at the moment. But we study. We practice as best we can. I ain't perfect. But that's what this is. So when I wear this, it's for me to remember how I'm supposed to walk on these roads of creation. When people see it, very often, presumably if they don't know me, even if they may know me, and they see this, and they know what this signifies, and the vast majority of kinfolk who wear this have most likely a geopolitical politics that are very different from what we practice. And I'm not disassociating myself, but there's just facts. So people make a presumption by anybody who's wearing the tzitzit of what their politics is. Pro-Israel, anti-Palestine, anti-Muslim, da-da-da-da-da. Understandable, logical, inaccurate. And as we know that Jesus says, do not put obstacles in front of the children of God for them to practice their spiritual practice. Do not hate any Jew, any son of Israel for wearing the tzitzit. Why? Because this is reminding that son of Israel to abide by the mitzvot. And those mitzvot ultimately accommodate Ishmael and the Ummah. So when Muslim kinfolk, our dear sacred Akim, Arabi, within Islam, see this, rather than immediate reaction of hatred, what we encourage, what we implore is a recognition that the wearer of that is striving to be in proximity and walk with Allah, to walk with Hashem. And that's the purpose of this. It's not a signal of hatred. It's not a signal of nationalism, even. It's not a signal of political allegiance. It's a reminder. So for the kinfolk, our sacred kinfolk, within the Ummah, consideration and invitation is to know further, to be further literate of what those standards of righteousness are. And when having an interest in advocating for Palestine, and advocating rightfully and dutifully for Palestinian kinfolk, for children, women, and men living and striving within Palestine, to understand what these mitzvot teach the practitioner of the responsibilities to properly care for and provide for the lives within Palestine, children, women, and men. That's the only way. That's the only answer. You have to know about the other, and you have to nurture and strengthen the righteousness within the other. You cannot conquer it. There is no compulsion in religion. It's not a numbers game to conquer and convert people to be your slave and do what you say. It's a matter of strengthening each one, each child of God, to have a greater knowledge of himself and greater capability of practicing the deen. And in doing that, that supports you. That supports your life. That supports life on this earth. It's easier to bomb. It's easier to make innovations, experimentations, and catastrophe, and then point fingers, and at the same time still trying to figure out the best way to cause further catastrophes. That's easy. It's easy to beat people down, starve people to the point of desperation till they sign whatever. Oh, come on board and pray with us then, brethren. No. Bullshit. Teach the people right. That's what the Quran says. That's what the Torah says. That's what Jesus says. The Buddha, Krishna, across the board, Lao Tzu. Teach the people right. Anything less. All right. Another practical consideration along these lines, similar related topic, methodology. Okay, so we can go back to this whole realm of like world civilization and where we are on this path. That's what we observe as the effective binary. Perhaps even for the next 7 generations. It's not a matter of religion. It's not a matter of ethnicity. The most significant distinguishing characteristic amongst peoples is effectively language. That's the biggest thing, because at this point, people jump from one boat to another on politics, on religion, on economics, on nationhood, or whatever else. From political parties, people jump. It's all sometimey, because there's little sense of belief, there's little sense of commitment, or whatever else. The big thing, the big signifier, the big distinction that determines a person's path in this life is language, because that determines who a person can interact with effectively and meaningfully, ongoingly. So, and that does have religious implications, it has ethnic implications and additionally, but that's the huge thing right there. So people like myself included, a lot of this is including myself. So, but when people are talking about wanting to be liberated, wanting to be free, African kinfolk, Al-Kebulan kinfolk on this land, wanting to be free, repatriated, liberation, bump Juneteenth and everything else like that. We want true liberation. True liberation is speaking the language of your ancestors and letting go as much as possible or effectively the language of the oppression. Liberation is mind and awakening. Liberation, that's the first step. That's foundational. But it proceeds further to when one wants to see it and endeavors to see it in a holistic sense. And I'll consider when, if at all, the live is just going to automatically just be, okay, that's enough. Anyways, Liberation is mind. We can talk about spirit, mind, but eventually, from just the mindset, for it to be further tangible in the earthly experience, language. Now we're getting the birthday joints again, the balloons. Language. Language. And that again, ain't nobody gonna learn a language for you except for you. You got to put in the work to learn that language of liberation. To learn, I say Swahili is somewhat of a cliche joint, but learn some Twi. Learn not just some Twi, be fluent in Twi. Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Amharic, Zulu, Wolof, the runes, Elder Foothawk, Svensk, Dansk, away from the imperial languages of English and Francais and Espanol, even Arabic, it's an imperial language. It's sad to say, but it is. It's a holy, sacred language, but it's also an imperialistic language. So learn the indigenous language of your mothers, learn the indigenous languages of your fathers, of your fars and Moors. That's what liberation is. That's the significant distinguishing component. So within our geopolitics as it continues to progress and evolve. But amidst all of this, the binary in human civilization, in world civilization, is essentially imperialism and indigeneity. Those are the two camps that exist in this life at this moment, and foreseeably for the next few generations. And I'm going to say, by the will of God, we're not trying to will this to happen. We're just observing, like, the trajectory, and that's the effective binary. Those who strive for the experience of the garden and living within relationship with nature, all our relatives, brother plants, brother oak tree, brother squirrel, brother sparrows, and brother swift, living in relationship with nature, garden, letting go of a lot of the technology and everything else like that. That's the garden experience. That's indigeneity. Going into one's own indigeneity, learning about one's own ancestors, and additionally, that's the indigenous experience. That's the one side. The other side is the imperial experience. That imperial balloon. Why the balloon? Why the balloon? Where does this come from? What precipitates the balloon? What am I hitting? Is that what does it? That doesn't do it. Does that do it? That doesn't do it. The balloons. Okay. I'm trying to dissuade myself from perceiving this as something that is actually being precipitated by somebody else's response to what I'm saying, and just trying to figure out why are these balloons emerging at these different points. So I'm an old head when it comes to this new tech. Indigenousness is one side. The other side is imperialism, and the imperialism is attachment to science. Well, I won't say science and technology as just like a rote kind of binary, but imperialism is attachment to the tower, to the towers. We can call it the towers of Babel. We can call it the towers of New York and Qatar and Malaysia and Japan and otherwise, the towers, the epitomes of civilization, the pyramids, the hierarchies, the orders of civilizational life, city, Babylon. Those are the binaries. Indigenousness and imperialism. Okay, maybe it's responding to my hand. I don't want it to do anything. Indigenousness and imperialism. Those are the two camps. And there's a spectrum. People can be like uber imperialism. People can be uber indigenous. People can be somewhere along lines. People can go back and forth during the course of a day, during the course of a lifetime. But that's it. Not religion, not ethnicity, not nationality. It's not even language. Indigenous and imperialism. Now, there's a third category, because there's always got to be, it's not an exception, but a further consideration. That third category is the enlightened camp. And the enlightened camp are kinfolk who have knowledge about the imperial and live within the ways and means of the indigenous. It's the example of the Levim. It's the example of the Sadhus. It's the example of people who awaken from the predatoriness of imperialism, and acknowledge that the ancient teachings of peace and reconciliation and spiritual ascension is garden, returning to that garden experience and living in the garden in peace with life in the garden. That's what it is. However, in this life, on this earth, at this moment, to do that, one has to live in an increasingly indigenous way and let go of a lot of the advantages and the protections that come with technology and the towers. And so there's continual vulnerability in the enlightened camp amidst the imperialism as well as within the indigenousness, because indigenous kinfolk don't care too much about, ain't no less predatory than imperial kinfolk, and have indigenous technology is very sufficient to do damage to kinfolk who are enlightened. Knives, clubs, fists, poison darts, abandonment, and otherwise. Because generally speaking, as much as enlightened kinfolk may endeavor to learn, ain't going to have as much of a knowledge about the garden as indigenous kinfolk do. Facts. So there's always going to be a vulnerability as an enlightened being. That's why there's that service. It's a matter of accepting that vocation of seva in this life as an enlightened being. So that's the camp that we proclaim ourselves within. And we might have biases one way or the other towards imperialism or towards indigeneity. But that's that. That's that. Shout out to Black Cream of the land of the Wasa and Hatvol Kaptunian. What up? What up? I must have done something decent. We got brethren on this joint. How long have you been here, brethren? And you know I'm an old head on this joint. I'm trying to hit back. It's been too long. Haha. I don't know how long ago that was. So, anyways, we got this binary of the imperialism and the indigeneity, and then we have the third camp of the enlightened. And that's where we see things going in the next few generations, 7 generations. And so it's for us to decide where we are, what rings true with us, and to be honest about that, and then like to commit ourselves within that so that we can have our optimal well-being within that camp, and be honest about that, not pretend. Not saying, oh, that'd be nice or whatever. But if we want to be imperialistic and we don't want to just deal with the vulnerabilities of being indigenous or enlightened, let's be honest about that. So that just because one is imperialistic doesn't mean we can't cooperate with those who are indigenous, and vice versa. But it's helpful for us to be honest about that for everybody's well-being and our own, so that we can have genuine conversation, genuine cooperation accordingly. So, all right, that's that. What else we got to share at this moment? That seems like much of it. Was there something else with this joint in terms of I was talking about like the context, indigenous and imperial. I mean, there are a lot of answers, and there are a lot of solutions, but that's conversation, that's consultation, and that's other than the purpose at the moment. The immediate purpose for this joint is just to give that heads up to kinfolk about just being recognized what kinfolk are doing, how kinfolk are getting involved, because I'll share with some of like the aftermath is in terms of like the activism that we are observing that I'm addressing right here. So what we observe, and again, this is coming from many years in the activist scene, and seeing like the trajectory, like what happens with young activists, what happens with old heads, and additionally, and how often young people are just chewed up for very selfish and calculated purposes. When young kinfolk see an injustice and are frustrated by it, and somewhat embarrassed by one's connection with it, and family is not willing to like divest from whatever the injustice is, and but at the same time, oh, I got to do something. I can't just like, I can't do this. It's not me. This is not what life's about. So there's this motivation to do something, and there are organizers, there are groups, there is leadership that says, oh yeah, you should come and join us. And it's not just a matter of like the rallies or the marches or whatever, or the protests. You get into the campaign situation or whatever else. But when one does that, when one gets into the activist scene, one is like narrowing one's affiliations. One is like making life increasingly binary, in vilifying one side and championing another side. And part of a significant challenge about that is that when championing a particular side at the cost of vilifying a side that's one close to oneself. For example, when we get involved within the campaign to change the name of Cleveland baseball, part of the intent, part of the event, and this is for years and years and years, and it's a legitimate thing. It's not the most prioritized thing, and I've said this before with kinfolk. It wasn't the most prioritized thing in terms of advocacy for indigenous people, because it's about sovereignty, it's about land, it's about self determination concerning economics, and what is done on the land, having the land be healthy, and keeping away the mining and the usurping and extraction of minerals and oils and other things that pollute the nature of the land and viability of the land. So those are for things that we see as further priorities. Dealing with the health issues, helping native kinfolk to learn further about themselves, history, language, particularly the ways and traditions, and supporting those who are hardcore traditionalists. That's what we see as priorities. So that's what we advocate. But the issue, at least in Cleveland here for many decades, respectfully, is about changing the name, and it's a dear and noble endeavor. And in that process, what we are called to do is to actually challenge a big company that is the big sponsor for Cleveland baseball at that time, because one of the big companies, there are a number of companies. One of the big company is Progressive Insurance. Huge company, but the founder, as I understand, the founder of the company actually graduated from my high school. So there's strong ties, and it's like part of the investments and relationships in the hierarchy of this metropolis. So to say anything about Progressive, oh, da 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 da. But when fighting for a cause and advocating for a cause, it's comparatively inconsequential who it is. Comparatively inconsequential who it is. Right is right, and if it's a priority, as indigenous issues tend to be on this continent, then okay. And if there's a refusal of like having talks and genuinely negotiating about a cause, then that opens the doors for further actions. So my point is that very often, and that's my personal experience, and I'm not saying what happened one way or the other, but I'm just giving an example how when taking up a cause that we're involved in for many years, and eventually that cause confronts us with going against an entity that is part of our larger or our close-knit community, and additionally it can be very challenging. So we have to be very mindful when making those decisions. We continue in the campaign, and eventually the name is changed, and we incur casualties in that process. I'm not going to go into further things about that, but that's what it is. My point for all of this is that when young people get the sense of injustice and frustration and embarrassment or guilt, and want to do something about it and want to join the cause and have this youthful exuberance, there's that neophyte militance of just like, and it's maybe a semblance of trying to regain that sense of purity from childhood and the innocence, and it seems just right there, just have to right this wrong right here. So there's just like, and those older people, blah blah blah, they're just so full of it, blah blah blah, they're so fake, blah blah blah. Be careful about this, because one, ain't nobody innocent in the game. So to presume like one side is just pure and holy and innocent, and the other is just pure evil and guilty, whatever, that's an oversimplification, and that's dangerous, because the leadership of the activist community, of the activist front and campaign, already knows that, and has already calculated the purposes of that campaign. And that includes who to expend. It's just like a military campaign, and particularly in the modern era. And in the modern era, how does the military campaign look? Generals who sit in very comfortable chairs in comfortable places with nurses and pretty women around, and additionally make decisions about who's going to die, who's going to be on the front lines, who's going to get bombed on their own side, who's going to go to the thick of it. And we can go to ancient times about this. David himself sending out kinfolk for the purposes on his own side of getting caught up in it. So today, modern warfare, generals make decisions about their own people, who's going to get done up in the theater of conflict. And then once things are determined, calculated on each side, then the generals kind of look at each other, the diplomats look at each other and say, okay, are we ready to do this? Okay, let's do this. And then they send their own kinfolk to get slaughtered in the warfare. And then when things settle down, then make an agreement about how to divvy things up accordingly. Their own people get killed in that process. And the similar thing, the same kind of mechanics go for activism. All the kinfolk who join the cause, young people who join the cause and are exuberant, and additionally, and boom, 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 and are on the front lines and are feeling some sense of valuation and getting that valuation from leadership. Where they, oh, thanks for coming out, man. That means so much. We appreciate your support. It means so much, and we want you to come through again. And so the person says, oh yeah, it feels like you're doing something. Be mindful, because where is it going? What's the greater purpose? What's the greater cause? What's the greater principle that's involved? And like I said, that campaign has already been calculated by the organizers. Who's the one who decided that this is going to be the protest? Why is this particular entity the one protest against? Is there another way to do this? Is there another way it's going to? What is the goal of this? Is that goal the most prudent goal? And is this the most prudent way of getting to that goal? And so again, who are you, newcomer? What you doing all this questioning, whatever else? Be mindful, because those questions have already been calculated for that particular campaign before they get to the newcomer, and it's just a matter of getting enough people to get involved to carry it out to success, or if it's not going to be a success, to carry it out to an optimal result, and then regroup and recalculate. So point is, in that process, very often a person who is a newcomer, young blood and energy, is solicited to be antagonistic against one's own kind. And it's very often gently, it's not even stated explicitly, but it's very subtle, and it's just very happenstance, because the target is already identified. And one of the strongest ways of getting at the target is enlisting the children of that target. Wada Meng Tzu teaches us about this, in that when it's righteous, children do not rebel against their own parents. But that's part of the symptom of modern democracy. Is an intrinsic rebelliousness and a disassociation within uber individualism and ego. So the campaigns are pre-calculated, and the newcomers are often very nuancedly, subtly, gently solicited to, basically what it is to get riled up in the emotion of it and feel like the love that is shared in solidarity, and of one's own volition, supposedly, start to say things that are very antagonistic and vilifying a particular side, without dutifully recognizing that in making these proclamations, one is vilifying one's own kinfolk. Dad might work for that company. Uncle might be a government worker for that company or whatever else. Not thinking about it, but when yelling out these curses or slogans or chants or whatever else, that resonating within the ears and the environment and the conditions of the elders of one's own community. So that by the time the rubble clears, and additionally, kinfolk in one's own community might have lost their jobs, might have lost their houses or whatever else, because these things are already calculated. And if you sleep on kinfolk who are brilliant and you think they're lesser than because they're a different color or a different creed than oneself, trouble. So we just can encourage kinfolk to be mindful, be honest. And here's the thing, in terms of solutions, whatever the goal is, and when it comes to Israel Palestine, how about this? And when we see, I don't see it on the campus recently because it's summer and school's out. School's out for summer. What up? I got all these multicultural references. What so I'm not seeing all the slogans and everything else like that. But when we do, what's the purpose? What's the goal? Even when we agree with the principle, where do you intend this to go? And one alternative suggestion that we share, rather than doing protests and marches, which is all bullshit, learn this, understand. That methodology is so antiquated. It's as antiquated and false as the government itself. It's a shell. It's a puppetry. It's a theater, and it's not even that's not how things are get done. Decisions aren't made in protests. People are enlisted and cuffed within protests and marches. So it's a very herd mentality. And also another thing is this: all sheep are wolves. Anybody who's that's another topic, but all sheep are wolves, particularly if you're eating pork chops and lamb chops and hamburgers. All sheep are wolves. Recognize that within ourselves and be true about that. Be honest about that, particularly when going out and trying to convert somebody else to be a sheep when oneself is actually a wolf. There are a lot of people who seem to actually believe that the kinfolk are sheep when they're actually wolves, and are recruiting people to be sheep and trying to genuinely believe that they're trying to recruit people to be sheep like themselves, but they are not themselves sheep. And that's not hating people. It's not condemning people, but just to recognize, wait, no, you're not a sheep yourself. How do you want me to be a sheep and you're a wolf? Wait a minute, no. Even the shepherd is not a sheep. What up? Hear me now. Peace and blessings to Jesus. Getting to a point here, though. Alternative goals rather than protests and marches. And I'm being specific here again. We're running back to the same scenario of Israel Palestine. When truly wanting to advocate for the Palestinian kinfolk, our sacred Palestinian kinfolk, children of God. When truly striving and advocating and supporting the people of Palestine. One, have your own talk with God and soul searching within oneself, because that's where the answers effectively are. But in the meanwhile, one, or I guess two, just plain facts. If you see a child wandering around and the child needs help or whatever, what's the first question you ask? Where are your parents? Where do you live? What's your home? It's not a matter of where are the robbers at? Who did Where are your parents? Where is your support? So if you're genuinely interested in the well-being of Palestinians, the first question you should be asking, aside from just talking with God yourself personally, the first question to ask to the kinfolk of Palestine is, where's your community? Where is the Ummah? Where is the Kingdom of Jordan? Where is Syria? Where is Arabia? Where are the rich ones? Where are the Emirates? Where is Qatar? Where is Iraq? Where is Iran? Where is Pakistan? Where is Indonesia? Where is Bangladesh? Where is the Ummah concerning Palestine? And the response might be, it's politics and this and the other. But that's the first go-to thing. It's not lambasting anybody. No, just very strategically. When you're doing anything, who's our peoples? Who's with us? And the fact is, there is not solidarity within the Ummah. Facts. Love and peace, but that's facts. And that's where the problem is. For any community. Same thing with the shul. Facts. So that's the first thing. Now, okay, if that's the actuality, but then what do we do today? Because we still need to do something. Something needs to be done. I have to do something because I feel responsibility to. Okay. Well, if we recognize that the Ummah itself ain't in the deen collectively sufficiently to respond to the concerns directly itself, then rather than just trying to weaken the antagonist in the situation. How about actually strengthening the ummah itself? Well, what does that mean? You want money? You want weapons? What are you talking about? No, because that's not believer talk. That's not believer walk. Believer talk and believer walk is okay. What can we do for the Muslims that we know, for our fellow students who walk within the fold of Islam, within the deen of Islam, within the ways of Islam? How can we strengthen the kinfolk in our midst at this moment? Students and people in our community. How can we help Muslim kinfolk? Not to be militaristic or whatever, but to be in the deen, to be spiritual in relationship with Allah, to help in encouragement and in support, to offer salat 5 times a day, to observe Ramadan thoroughly, not just fasting, but iftar and all the additional elements of community and communication during Ramadan and Hajj, as it recently is. That's the genuine ally. That's the genuine allegiance when one is a non-Muslim. If one is a Muslim, then it's doing that oneself. So how can a non-Muslim, and again, even in believer talk, everything is Islam. Everything is Islam. So, but for those who don't proclaim Islam, who don't make shahada or otherwise, what can one do for the ummah, for the cause, whatever else? We have some very simple, accessible, tangible suggestions. One, we recognize at the campus here, and many campuses that we visit, when we go to offer salat, when we go for Jummah, and additionally, what we see is that many of the Muslim student associations are without an actual designated space to do these things, and so are hosted by, generally speaking, a Christian entity on campus, have a room within a church or otherwise. And that's not a very supported, I mean, we appreciate everything that exists, and we don't want to naysay that. So that's appropriate to recognize that. But that being said, one does not feel genuinely supported when having to go through somebody else's gates in order to offer the rakat, offer salat. There's a hindrance. So for those who are fellow students and not practicing Muslims, one thing that kinfolk can do is advocate for the university's Muslim Student Association to have a designated space on campus, not just for salat, not just for Jummah, but for other gatherings, and additionally for social space, away from all the negative haram on campus. Wonga. Not just a space in the multicultural facility that's run by the LGBTQ overseers. A designated space for the ummah on campus to speak loud in Arabic and joke with each other in the different dialects, and additionally, and teach other kinfolk some of the lingo and the ways in the process. What better dawah? So the activists, instead of spending time marching and protesting against administration, the administration is going to capitulate one way or the other, because it has to. It's so porous in corruption. And that's no shade, but that's just facts. Because when you see what the administrations on the typical university campus allow the typical student and student organizations to do in terms of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it shows that things are out of control. So it's just a matter of having a cultivated demeanor, a modulated tone, and approaching with solemnness and seriousness as a collective, an activist collective, and say, we solicit the administration of this university to establish this particular space, blank building, blank room, blank floor, and blank building, to the Muslim Student Association for the purposes of Juma, as well as Salat throughout each day, and organizational gathering for the Muslim Association, as well as for associative organizations, and that might get a little bit complicated there, but keep it simple. Muslim Student Association, boom. That's enough right there. If need be, if comfortable, you can say for a period of 5 years, 10 years, whatever else. And no monies necessary. This is all part of what universities have an obligation to provide in terms of the contractual relationship between students and the institutions. So there's no necessity of fundraising or anything else like that. No, you got plenty of buildings on this campus. Make some space. And respectfully. We say that respectfully. That's how to advocate, because then when kinfolk are able to do that and be comfortable being oneself. Anyway, that's one solution. That's one thing kinfolk can do. That's further effective and accessible and otherwise. I have not had my tea yet. Blange. How many? We had 2 hours now. Wani. All right. I'm gonna give another suggestion. And this is actually a macro suggestion and this is for Islam. This is for all religions. Well, generally all religions that proselytize. How about this? Here's a basic truth. Just as we talk about the Ummah, we say it for Judaism as well. Judaism's house is not in order. Without getting into the details of contention concerning Eretz Israel and Palestine, the land of Palestine, without getting into that, again, as I mentioned before, I mentioned before, it is a question of righteousness. And it is only when the collective of people live within a certain level of righteousness that then that people have a right of belonging to the land and stewardship to the land. There's never ownership. It's never any people's land. People have a belonging to be stewards on that land when attaining to a certain level of righteousness. And as we understand, when it comes to Jewish kinfolk, the vast majority of kinfolk in Israel, as well as within the diaspora, are non-observant, or at least non-observant of the full halakhic mitzvot according to Torah. So that's not attaining the level of righteousness necessary for teshuvah and aliyah. So the claims along those lines is wanting. But at the same time, the ummah, how about that? How corrupt? How pervasive is corruption within the ummah? To be honest, I mean, this is facts. When somebody asks me, and I haven't said this, and I'm not trying to be controversial, and I'm not trying to be all hardcore now and be fakey wakey in person, because I'm always trying to find the common ground, and I'm not trying to be confrontational. This is a place this is a space for articulation and sharing as it is. If people want to bring this up to me in my face, beautiful. Let's talk about it respectfully. But otherwise, I'm not going to introduce this, because most often, people ain't ready to hear this and not see it. When hearing it, there's often the susceptibility of perceiving this as in an antagonistic way, and it's not intended as that. I speak kind of matter-of-factly, particularly when in this little realm. All right, but the point is this: when I'm asked if I'm Muslim, again, are you ready for this spiritual conversation? Because if you are Muslim and you believe in Islam and you listen to the teachings of the Quran, then that's the answer for you already. Everyone is Islam. Everyone is Muslim. The trees are Muslim. The birds are Muslim. The clouds are Muslim. But you know what I mean. Well, now it sounds like you're asking a political question. And if I answer that political question and you apply it to my spiritual practice, that's going to be an inaccuracy on your part, and that's going to be problematic for you. And so I can answer it in a way that you are looking for, but at the same time, if you learn something else about me, then you might consider myself or accuse me of being a hypocrite or a liar. And again, it's just a matter of accuracies and listening. So the further consideration in this is this, our additional consideration is this: what is a Muslim? Honestly, what is a Muslim? We can talk about, make shahada, and then offer salat, observe Ramadan, Hajj or Zakat, Hajj, Ram, Zakat, Ramadan, Hajj. There we go. Study, righteous, no sex, no alcohol outside of marriage, no alcohol outside of marriage, no sex outside of marriage, no alcohol, but actually, it has some benefit, but the harm is worse than the benefit. Um, but those are the general. Those are much of the general. But the five pillars: Shahada, Salat, Zakat, Ramadan, Hajj. Okay, does every Muslim actually do that? And then some who are hardcore Muslim will say, well, yeah, there are a lot of fakers and this and the other. But if you're going to call them a non-Muslim, that's a strong thing right there, brethren. You know that. But if you call them Muslim, then what does being a Muslim mean? Where does one draw the lines? And how does one line? Then we get into a contention of lines because people are drawing their different lines. And now you want me to place myself amidst this mosaic of lines. And again, even in having that conversation, particularly at the very beginning and at the beginning of a conversation, it's a legitimate question. And people aren't trying to be so definitive or whatever else. I've asked that question myself on numerous occasions without intending for people to proclaim their identity, because I know most people don't receive that question and such. And generally, the only reason why I ask is if I've greeted a person not knowing the person is Muslim or not being sure if the person is Muslim, and then in talking with the person for a few minutes or whatever, and then I say, oh, are you Muslim? And they say yes. Then I say, assalamu alaikum, because I didn't say that to begin with. I might have said peace be with you or something of similar congeniality, but if I'm starting to think, oh, this person might be Muslim, then I have an obligation to offer the greetings of it, assalamu alaikum. And that's why I ask, because if it's not Muslim, then okay, that's fine. And if they are Muslim, oh, beautiful, assalamu alaikum. That's it. That's my reason for asking, and that's pretty much the only reason why I ask, because it's comparatively indifferent for me. I love all peoples, and I support all peoples. I believe there's truth in all peoples. And that's the way of our walk. And I am Rastafari. I am Muslim. I am Jewish. I am Hindu. I am Christian. I am Buddhist. I can say I'm Baha'i. Baha'is might say something else. I am Sikhi. I am Jain. I am indigenous. I proclaim particular, I know these aren't identities, but I particularly proclaim certain factions. I'm African, I'm European, I'm Middle Eastern, I'm Asian, I'm indigenous in terms of my ethnicity. But ultimately, I'm world, I'm Earth. That's the simplest, most honest response to that situation. I am getting somewhere with this. Ain't I? There's a suggestion. All right. I'm trying to think of how I got onto that side note. But I was giving a macro suggestion for Dawah. I just gave the one about supporting Muslim kinfolk for having a space to pray, and that gives kinfolk a solid foundation for themselves. And that doesn't mean that okay, now they have their space, now they can like strategize how they're going to do this campaign or whatever. That's not what it is. This is not some 4-year presidential cycle plan. This is a long-term trod. This is 7 generations. So, okay, you did a campaign your sophomore year at university, and the result, the success of that campaign is you got this entire floor devoted to the Muslim Student Association. So now they have this huge room where all hundreds of the Muslims on campus have a place to go for Jummah. Wow, alhamdulillah. And then there's an office space where student organizations can meet, and there's a place to socialize, and alhamdulillah, that's amazing. That's a fantastic, and then the organization, all students have access to that space throughout the day to offer a salat at any time. Alhamdulillah. That's amazing, because that's not what exists right now. Not even that exists right now. You got to have codes and gatekeepers and time schedules and office hours. That's not a safe space to practice spirituality. One does not feel supported, so that when encountering all the nakedry and all this nasty stuff on campus, where's the quietude? Where do I find sanctuary? Well, today it's over here, and then tomorrow it's over there. Yo, you in the Underground Railroad right now, on campus, for the cause of Palestine, and don't even see it. So wait a minute, we were able to do that. We got the entire floor with this large space for prayer and meeting space, and can have meals. Oh, we can have iftar here, alhamdulillah, and meetings. And this was what? Wait, you said this was the Newman campus ministry that helped with this, and wait, Hillel helped on doing this? What? The Interreligious Council helped on establishing this for the Muslim Student Association in the midst of warfare? What? Ugh, that's nasty beautiful. And that inspires other student organizations to do the same on their campus. We did this, why don't you have this for yours? Okay. But what does that do? So now what do we expect? What's going to be the dividends to show for this? How about don't worry about it? How about let the kinfolk cook? Literally. How about visit sometimes and see for yourself? How about learn some of the names of the kinfolk and see for yourself? And in doing that, maybe a few years later, you see, oh, wait a minute. You can see it in statistics. Maybe the retention rate is higher. Maybe the GPA rate is higher. Maybe the postgraduate progresses. Maybe the marriage rate is higher. Ooh, what? Maybe you got further college romances properly manifesting into marriage during collegiate years, immediately following collegiate year. You got children now, born 2-3 years after. You got families because people had a safe place to gather and socialize and learn about each other and build relationship in a respectful, proper way with each other. And so that 2 years later, you got children now, marriage and children. Alhamdulillah. Okay, wait, what does this have to do with Palestine? Are you sure? It's we're building. This is not a get free quick thing. You think is the solutions are just gonna snap at a finger? Let's get real. Let's be honest, and let's get to it. So another macro solution is long-term dawah. And again, this is for any religion that does conversion and proselytizing or whatever else. We not on that. Judaism doesn't proselytize, as I mentioned before. Rastafari does not proselytize. Indigenousness does not proselytize. We on that boat. We don't proselytize. But we know that others do. Wait, how can you be Muslim and not proselytize? How can you be Christian and not proselytize? For those that have ears to hear, let them hear. Continuing on. Dawah. Long-term dawah. Oh yeah. So every religion, every world religion with a diaspora, with millions of members around the world, and additionally, the house is in disorder. And for anybody whose house is in disorder, it is inappropriate for that person or that peoples to go out and recruit people to be in that house whilst the house is in disorder. Because what that recruitment is, it's not a recruitment into faith. It's not a recruitment into strength. It's a recruitment into the disorder. And whatever hierarchies of corruption and semblances of order and protection and temptation and otherwise exist within that disorder. The order and the disorder. And let's be honest about that. That's facts. So until the house is in proper order, like there's no world religion that has business actively recruiting people to join up. Get the house in order first. Otherwise, like legitimate. Otherwise, you're actually doing things that are against Islam. Why? Because, again, when proactively recruiting people to join into something that you know is disorder, that is leading people into circumstances of obstruction. And yes, amidst that obstruction, you might offer some education, you might provide some necessary guidance, but at the same time, it's still, I won't get into the details of it, but it's leading people into further dependency within the corruption of the community. And again, this is any religious community. And when leading people into dependency in that corruption, amidst whatever genuine knowledge of self that you are sharing, that's an obstacle. That's enslavement, and that is trife. That is haram. I would say blasphemous, but something along those lines. And that's why we caution kinfolk about that. Now, we're not saying absolutely not proselytize. We don't do it ourselves, but we can't tell others not to do it. We can tell others to respect. And if there's a group that doesn't want it, then we can have a conversation about that. But here's what we offer as the alternative, as another way of dawah, because ultimately we can get into the whole reasoning thing of everybody's proselytizing. Everybody intrinsically is promoting one's own way of being upon others and this and the other. So that's a further level existential kind of conversation that we have, and there's truth to that. In the meanwhile, we're going to share this suggestion as a viable, practical alternative or methodology, given the conditions of the moment. And that is to cultivate, to support the mystic groups, the mystic paths that already exist within your religious fold. The Christian mystics, the Muslim mystics, Sufi, and additionally Jewish mystics, but again, Judaism doesn't proselytize. But the mystic strands, the mystic lineages, the mystic circles, even within, again, Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, each religiosity has its mystic element. And so the suggestion, the humble suggestion, the respectful suggestion for the hardcore in any religiosity is to invest within your mystic circles, to establish, to strengthen your institutional relationship and support and systemic cooperation with your own established mystic groups. Now, there's a lot of vilification, there's a lot of admonishment, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of claims back and forth, there are a lot of things that are very disagreeable. A lot of the mystic strands and lineages and circles are very loose in terms of behavior, and that's very challenging. So to sanction is very challenging as well. But there are ways of building institutional relationship, and that institutional relationship can be predicated upon adherence to whatever authentic ethical codes and discipline are deemed appropriate. But to establish that institutional relationship with each group, with each religion's own mystic circles and lineages. And in doing that, when that's established, or amidst that being established, and amidst the middle ground of proper behavior, the ethical behavior that's genuine, authentic, and can be supported by the larger conservative, old school religion community, with that effectively established, then investing further, rather than in dawah, and rather than in weapons, and rather than in warfare technology and other expenditures, similar expenditures, investing increasingly in and around your own mystical communities. What does that mean? There are already retreat centers, meditation centers, retreat centers, sanctuaries, and additionally within Islam, within Sufi, within Christianity, within Buddhism, and additionally there are a lot of communities that do a lot of recruitment for retreats and seminars and workshops and other things, programs for kinfolk who are not a part of the religious community. So there's a lot of economics when it comes to the mystic scene, film and media and other things like that. So invest further in that, so that it's a further of a thing. And there's communities that are actual living communities. And here we go again into this community thing. But of course, this is the answer for life at this moment, at this day. It's always been this way, but particularly today. People need a safe place to be. So investing in the mystical communities to build and establish communities, not only for the community's own selves, but to provide these services and have additional residents. And so now, wait a minute, you're talking about other people from other religions living in these mystic communities, according to the rules or principles and ethics of the mystic community or the religious community that is subsidizing the mystical community. But they're not part of the religion, they're not part of the mystical community, but they can interact and socialize easier with the members of the mystic community than the staunch conservative orthodox religious practitioners, because the way of life and the mentality is further congruent amongst the secular or intellectual or searching community and the mystical community. So that's a methodology of Dawah. That's a methodology of missionary work, or however you want to, whatever language you want to apply. It's further genuine, authentic, no ulterior motives. It's all like, this is what we are, this is what we do, this is what our want is, and these are our different wants, because not everybody in our collective wants the same thing or is driven to do the same thing. So here is all on the table, and this is why we're doing it, so that those who participate do so intentionally, do so comfortably, do so enduringly, even across generations. And it might not be the numbers, the big numbers from year to year of conversion and how many people we baptized or how many people made shahada or otherwise. Is that what it's for? Is that what the whole dawah, is that what the missionary work is for? No, it's not about numbers. And the numbers are not even about this lifetime. So it's about genuine walk and answering the needs of the day. And that's what this is. So that's one of the suggestions we share, is to invest within your own mystic communities and the infrastructure, the systemic cooperation between your religious community and your mystic communities, and then further around your mystic communities and the infrastructure and relationship of your mystic communities with the larger world and the peoples of the world who are naturally, organically drawn in proximity with your mystic communities. Again, that tends to be intellectuals, young people, and we're not talking about hippie communes of polyamory and everything else like that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about living in a traditional way according to the rules of the religiosity, but not necessarily with the same presence and authoritarianism of the religiosity, so that there's further comfortable congruence between the people who are outside of the religious community but living in proximity with the mystic community. So that's the suggestion. That's what we got to share at this moment. It's over 2 hours now. Now we got to worry about plugging this computer in because the battery. We shared a lot already. I think that's going to be much of it at this moment. This is our Juma experience for today, and I have yet to have tea, have yet to eat. Audi. Okay. There's so much further to share, but that's what we got for this moment. And again, we are withdrawing considerably from the technology like livity. Not absolutely, not categorically, but generally. So can't make any promises about what we may do in the near future in terms of further posts or whatever else. I can tell you that I'm going to sweat. I'm going to sweat, as I've been doing. Oh, this is a little bit colorful. This is the further masculine joint, but it's smaller. And I forgot I'm presenting right now. So, anyways, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names. Respect, honor, and gratitude to all our relations, the four directions of the wind, Inamaka, Far Sky, Grandmore Luna, Grand Far Soleil, all our plant relatives, all our insect relatives, all our swimming relatives of the waters, all our flying relatives of the air, all our walking relatives of the land, with 0 legs, with 2 legs, with 4 legs, and with many legs. Respect, gratitude, and honor to all our ancestors, all our prophets, all our sages, past and present, known and unknown. Respect, gratitude, and honor to all our relatives whom we meet within this life and who are returned home within the dreaming and now walk with our ancestors within the oneness of the Most High Elohim. Respect, gratitude, and honor to all our parents, all our forebears, and all our elders who precede us in life. Respect, gratitude, and honor to all our relatives who walk the roads of creation with us today. Wives, husbands, brothers, sisters, and cousins. Respect, gratitude, and support to all our progeny, de los primeros 7 años a los próximos 7 generaciones, dor vador. Blessings of healing, well-being from Elohim be with all our relatives in need. Respect, gratitude, and honor to His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waizara Manen, and to all the progeny of this marriage, and to the perfect balance of husband and wife. One heart, one mind, one love supreme. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari, all our relations.